Hey folks, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Natasha and I do book things here. Today's video is going to be my October wrap-up, and yeah, October was a pretty solid month. I focused primarily on reading spooky things, as I think most people did. I did participate in Spookathon and did challenges and whatnot for that. I wasn't joking when I said I had a TBR of like 50 books that I wanted to read in October. I ended up reading 12, which is reasonable, doable. That's pretty on average for what I've been reading lately. As usual, I'm gonna break down my stats, tell you guys what those are. Alright, so as I mentioned, I read 12 books in the month of October. That was 3,607 pages, which is about 116 pages per day. There were definitely days where I didn't read at all. There were days where I read a whole book. Some of those are actually graphic novels, so all in all, when I took my vacation time off, I didn't read that much. I kind of focused on doing like fun stuff. If you guys saw my October fall lookbook inspired video, that was over the course of several nights and several days that I filmed that stuff, and we were traveling around going to fun places and stuff. My star ratings were a bit all over as well. I did have one 1-star book, one 2-star book, 3 3-stars, 3 4-stars, and 4 5-stars. So I definitely had like an even range of stuff. You know, those 4 5-star books like were really quite enjoyable, but those 1s and 2s kind of like, you know, brings the month down. So when I kind of put all those ratings together, the overall month was a 3.6, which I would love it if like the month was like a 4.5. Everything I read was a 5-star, you know, but it was a nice mix of really good stuff and not so good stuff. Also, I want to apologize, I am sick right now in this video. This is all a lie. Underneath this, I'm actually a mucus troll. There's random cuts in this video. It's because I'm literally dripping out of every orifice, so that's fun. My genres were varied enough, but not really a surprise given it was a spooky month. I had one nonfiction, a mystery, a horror, a graphic novel, a short story collection, a graphic novel, horror, dystopian, mystery, horror. So obviously you guys can tell what my focus was for the month of October. I did read 10 adult books and 2 YA. Typically for mystery and horror, I tend to stay away from YA. I know that's kind of a judgment towards YA, but I haven't really read a lot of like thrillers, mystery, horror in the YA genre that I've really liked. Feel free to change my mind on that though. If you have any recommendations, please leave them down below. I read 4 female authors, 7 male, and 1 by both, which was the short story collection. And the release dates or the release years were 2018, 17, 16, 16, 15, 16, 17, and 1982, 2018, 16, 17, 17. So, you know, the majority of them were from the last 4 years, with the exception of my one Stephen King, which was 1982. So as mentioned, those are my stats. I'm gonna get into the 12 things that I read and bitch about them and talk about them. As usual, I start with my lowest rated book and I end on a high note. And so my 1-star book this month, I've ranted about this at length at work, so anyway. That is The Universal Harvester by John Darnielle. I realize that he is a musician of some sort. He should probably stick to that. I'm just sorry, John, I'm sure you're a lovely person, but this book was kind of trash. In my opinion. Some people may really like it. I found this to be a book that falls into the whole, this is what the synopsis says, this is what the book is about. The synopsis for this is setting it up as a horror novel where the guy works at a like VHS store, like a Blockbuster, and people keep coming in and giving him tapes that have like weird film clips like edited into it, which, you know, that setup 100% made me buy the book. 100%. I bought this on Book Outlet. I'm happy I didn't pay like full price for it, but you know, when you're setting it up like that, I then don't expect to go into a book, have it be maybe 5% about that, and then go on a completely different like trail of whatever this book was about. I'm not gonna lie, I finished this, couldn't tell you one character's name, no fucking idea. At some point I just had straight up no idea what was happening. Like, I couldn't tell you what actually happened in this book. The main reason for that is that it jumps from, like, we're talking paragraph to paragraph, it jumps from he said, I said, breaking the fourth wall, like, hey reader, then it's this person's perspective, and that person, and I, and me, and she, and he, and you, and it, listen, I'm all for different styles and different layouts and formats of books, but this made no fucking sense, and I gave it a 1, because immediately upon putting it down, I went, who knows what that was. If it was going to be a confusing book like that, just tell me it was going to be a confusing book like that. Don't set it up to be something and then have it disappoint me. So that is a major 1 star. I do not recommend. If you read the synopsis and you think you're getting that book, you're not. So just know that if you are looking at that one. So moving on to my 1 2-star book. This one had just sort of the opposite of that one, where, you know, the first one, it was just like, I don't know what's going on. It was so dull. Ugh, it was just so dull, and I knew everything. Anyway, I'm just gonna talk about it. That is A Stranger in the House by Sherry Lapina. I read another Sherry Lapina, really liked it, found it very intriguing. Both of these, the ones that I read from her, are like domestic thrillers, only my god, this is dull. How long is this? 300 pages, give or take, and I swear 200 pages, I was just like, yeah, okay, anything gonna happen? No? Okay. Oh, yep, it's these people's lives. Yep, okay. Like, it was just, there was nothing going on until the last maybe like 5 pages. And even then, not that exciting. Yeah, this is just a basic domestic thriller. The wife ends up in an accident. She forgets why she was at that scene. It's pretty boring. That's all. It's really pretty boring. The surprises and the twist, I could kind of see coming. It wasn't really like, oh my god, I am so shocked. Like, it was kind of like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Next. Like, what's the next twist, please? Because that was pretty understandable. Kind of a dud. So, I gave it a 2. Okay, sorry, I'm back. I had to blow my nose and watch a Twitter video of a little bear trying to climb up this big snowy mountain. It was an emotional roller coaster. I'm just gonna say that. You know what wasn't an emotional roller coaster? Some of these 3-star books. So let's talk about those. The first one that I read was Stephen King's The Running Man. This was pretty average. I knew a little bit about what this was about going into it, although Jeff did kind of spoil me on what happened because he'd have seen the movie, which is not good, by the way. It is a dystopian world where people... Basically, it's almost like Stephen King's The Hunger Games is the best way I can describe it. Basically, there's poor people and they compete in these like televised programs to win a lot of money, and it follows this one character who's just trying to get money and medicine for his daughter and his wife. And so he signs up for the show and gets drafted, I guess, into this very serious show where he's basically being hunted and has to like outlive the people hunting him for several hours. It takes an interesting twist, and you know, it was okay. It just wasn't that like thrilling, I guess. It's short though, it's like 240 pages. I just gave it a 3 just because I wouldn't have wanted to read 500 pages of it, like, let's just put it that way. So I'm happy it was short. It was just sort of average level, medium. This is a Stephen King with 0 horror in it, so if you guys are looking to pick something up that has 0 horror in it, and that sort of like premise sounds interesting to you, then I do suggest it. I just found it pretty basic, pretty neutral. Next is an ARC copy of a book that I received from HCC Frenzy, so thank you for that. That is Lauren Oliver's Broken Things. This has since then come out. I'm trying to like stay on top of my ARCs a little bit. Failing horribly at that, by the way. This is a book that follows 2 friends and their lives sort of after one of their friends was brutally murdered, and everyone sort of thinks that they did it or had some sort of like play in it. In the meantime, they kind of know and think that somebody else did it, and they're trying to figure out who, a little bit of a mystery, whatnot. My main issue with this is like it's roughly based on like the Slenderman sort of like tale where, like, you know, they kind of take their friend into the woods, blah blah blah. There is sort of a fantasy element to this slightly, and that's what I actually really liked about this book, is that it, you know, it followed these girls. They're very into this like fantasy novel, and so the whole book you're kind of figuring out like, okay, is this fantasy world real or not? And I really like that aspect of it, but everything else about it, again, just kind of dull. I had to remind myself what I read after I read it. You know, because there were parts in it that definitely kept my interest. Like at one point you're like, ooh, yeah, I think this person did it. And then you're like, ooh, no, I think it was this person. And it ends up being a completely different person. The mystery was pretty good, but I don't know, the writing just irked me. I wasn't a big fan of it. And then there is some representation in this that sucks. It is garbage. I don't know, I kind of glossed over it when I was reading it. Not like when I was finished the book, it went out of my memory because it was just like an annoying thing throughout the book. Basically, there is a plus-size character in this book who gets just described like shit, and it's just some horrible description, and it's just like, really? Yeah, like, but the overall sort of enjoyment factor of this book wasn't brought down because of that. I just found it to be relative, like, again, like, this was entertaining, not a 4-star book. Same thing with this. Like, I was entertained by parts of this. Like, I put it down one time and I'm like, Jeff, I think it was this person that did it, you know? You know, I was definitely intrigued by the book. It was just, once all was said and done, I kind of went, okay, that was a slightly enjoyable thing I read. Like, that's what's so hard to talk about 3-star books, because you don't have a, like, oh, I really hated this opinion, and like, oh yeah, it's amazing opinion, right? Like, you're just kind of, neutral. And then the other 3-star book that was just okay as well was Meddling Kids by Edgar Cantero. This is pretty much like Scooby-Doo gang meets the kids from It sort of thing. Although this took a twist where it got too far into like the fantasy element, and again, it had a little bit of like, what the fuck is going on? I don't know what's happening. Where are they? Like, this book could have been 500 pages long, and I probably would have enjoyed it more. And the reason for that is that the world building wasn't that great. You know, I like the characters, I like the story that they're following and trying to figure out like what happened from their childhood and blah 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 blah. Fun, right? I like that. That's fun. I do like the sort of Scooby-Doo reference, like they have an old car and like blah blah blah, and there's a dog and, you know, that kind of thing. That's fun. It was a lot of fun, but I couldn't picture what any of these people were doing, because they hopped to so many different locations in, like, you know, this is 326 pages. They hopped to so many different locations, and it was just hard for me to picture it, that's all, you know? So, like, I feel like this could have done with being buffed out a little bit more in terms of the world building, because the ideas that were there were a lot of fun. I just couldn't picture them, which sucks, because then you're kind of just reading just for the sake of reading, as opposed to getting any sort of visual as to what the fuck is happening. Again, like, all 3 of my 3-star books, enjoyed all of them, just wish they were more, or less in some cases, you know, like, just, yeah, anyway. Yeah, so moving into 4-star books. These were books that I thoroughly enjoyed, just didn't quite take me there, they weren't perfect. The first one is my only non-fiction for the month, and the one book that I just straight up wanted to read in October. That is I'll Be Gone in the Dark. This is one woman's obsessive search for the Golden State Killer by Michelle McNamara. For those of you who are not aware, she has passed before the release of this book and before the capture of what we believe is the Golden State Killer now. And this was... how do I say this? I think had we not caught him now, and this book was released while we were still searching for him, I probably would have enjoyed this a lot more. But I am a natural, like, true crime liker person. Like, I will deep dive into, like, articles, police reports. Like, I'm that person. Like, I'm not web sleuth level, but I will, like, Reddit search something for hours. And so I'm sort of, I guess, on the unpopular side of things in that I wanted more details than what this book provided me, even though the details are horrific. And I know most of the details, and most of the horrific details, I wanted to see them in this. That being said, what was included in this, if you know nothing about the case, was good, and you'd probably be freaked the fuck out if you are a person who doesn't listen to or look into a lot of true crime, I can understand how this book would scare you, because it is real life scary, and that is scary. I personally find real life scary to be more terrifying than something set up in my head in a book, just because, you know, these crimes occurred. There's certain aspects of things that the killer said and did that I went, ugh. Like, it gives you the genuine creeps. That's what this book did. But the reason why I'm giving it a 4 is because I wanted more, but I think a lot of people, this is enough. But I know, just me personally, I wanted more details and more sort of like gruesome stuff. But anyway, yeah, I did find this really, really interesting. Read through it so fast. Yeah, it's dark though, I'm not gonna lie. Like, when any time that you're sort of dive into true crime, it's bound to get more dark than if you're just, you know, reading something that someone's brain cooked up, right? So just know that. But it is worth a read for sure if you want to know more about that case. And maybe if you haven't done as much Reddit searching as I have, then it's worth a read. The next 4-star book is one that I found thoroughly entertaining, but it was just the curse of the ending sucked ass. I'm not gonna lie. That is Hex by Thomas Old Huvelt. This is translated from Dutch, I want to say. I had to think what language they speak in the Netherlands. It's got to be Dutch, right? Yeah, so it's translated from Dutch, and there's definitely parts of this that read as if it was translated, so just kind of know that going in. But I'd say 80% of this book was so entertaining and so much fun to me, and I loved it, but the ending is garbage. So this gives you a look into a Hudson Valley town that is set in 2012, and they are being haunted, or they have a curse of a 17th century witch who just appears, like, in their town. And the thing is that I thought this could go one of two ways, and I'm kind of happy the way that it went. It could have gone very, very, very scary or funny. And they went more of the humor route, which I thought was perfect. And so, you know, you start off this book with these people who live in this town. It's very gated, like they're completely closed off. They have all these security cameras set in place to basically watch the witch, and they have an app that they update, like, oh yeah, she's here, that kind of thing. And, you know, she appears in the living room, and they just kind of put like a dish towel over her face, and it's like, oh, yeah, Granny's in the living room. I found it so funny. Like, I just, because like that's, I don't know, to me, that's, I deal with like that kind of shit with humor, and that's the kind of shit that like I would do, like, you know, anyway. But as the story progresses, you realize, one, like, why she's there, two, why her eyes and her mouth are sewn shut, which is creepy, I'm not gonna lie. And you follow this family and also a group of teenagers who are basically like fucking with the witch, and it's like, you probably don't want to do that, and sort of the repercussions that come from doing that. Yeah, there's parts of this where I was just like screaming at the book, like, leave the witch alone. Like, she's just trying to haunt you a little bit, like, just leave her alone. I found the witch just like a great character and pretty funny. But as it progresses and as you find out more, and the ending sort of just happened, I didn't care for the ending whatsoever. I found it to be like really quite blah, and I'm kind of like a blah ending. I was hoping for something else, so that's why I ended up giving it a 4. It's really more of like a 3.5, 3.75 book, but like I don't do half ratings really. So I just kind of bumped it up to the 4 because for the majority of the book I was very, very entertained, but the ending just kind of like, meh. Kind of took it down. I do recommend it for people who like more funny horror and like the premise of that, because I thought it was fucking funny. So moving on. And then the last 4-star book here was one again that I like needed to read this month. So happy that I did. That is a short story collection that's Slasher Girls and Monster Boys. Now, I didn't know going into this that all the stories in this were based off of existing pop culture like references. So there's like a story based on The Crow, the story based on Psycho, based off of Norman Bates, like all this stuff. There were just stories like based off of existing like movies and pop culture. Yeah, I didn't know that, and had I known that going in, I probably would have read this a lot sooner because it was great. Naturally, with short story collections though, there's some that I liked more than others, but for the most part, all of them were really fucking creepy. There's a couple in here that stand out like being really creepy. I really like The Birds of Azalea Street, In the Forest Dark and Deep was really good. Sleepless by Jay Kristoff was fantastic, and there's a couple other ones in there that were just really, really good, and there's stories in here that I won't be forgetting anytime soon, which is something that happens when I read short stories in my head and whoop out like immediately. But there's a couple in here that like will stick with me and I will remember for like a period of time, which is exciting. But yeah, overall I ended up like rating them all separately and putting them all together, and it was basically close to a 4, so I ended up rating it a 4. And then lastly, moving into my 5-star books, I'm gonna start with 2 here. I picked up both volume 1 and volume 2 of I Hate Fairyland, and I rated them both a 5 because this is wonderful. The artwork in this is just fucking amazing. The concept of it is just great. The like how morbid it is wonderful. This is like a mix between, I don't even know how to describe it. I don't even know. It's just, I don't know. It's just lovely. It follows Gertrude, which is Gertrude right here. And she basically ends up in falling through a door and ended up in Fairyland. And she can't find the key to get out of it. And so she ends up staying looking like a child, but in fact she is a 37-year-old woman in the body, and she is basically trying to get this key to get out, and various things happen on her journey. I will be picking up probably for Christmas maybe volumes 3 and 4, because I think 4 is actually the last one, and I would love to have like a completed series and know how it wraps up. But if you are looking for a fun, gory, brightly colored graphic novel, this one is fucking fantastic. It's so much fun. So much fun. Loved it a lot. And then the next book is hard for me to talk about, just because it is a 5-star book. I loved it, but there is sort of like a twist that no one really talks about, and I don't want to spoil it because you need to read this book if you haven't read it yet. It is I Let You Go by Claire McIntosh. Oh, this book, gave me a lot of emotions, and as I was reading it, there's a character in this that is realistically terrible. I'm not going to get too much more into it. Just know that pretty much trigger warnings for like everything, give or take. So if you're somebody who is just sensitive in general, you might want to look up maybe trigger warnings for this book. Just try not to look up spoilers, just know sort of what you're going into. Even the trigger warnings that I were to tell you were probably going to like spoil the ending for this. Yeah, so that's why it's hard to talk about. This follows a woman as she sort of moves into this cottage and is dealing with the result of like losing her child and that kind of thing. Let me just tell you, this book took me through so many emotions. Basically I kind of thought that this was happening, and then this was happening, and then this character appeared, and I didn't like that character, and I trusted no one in this book, and it took me through an absolute ride. There were parts of this that I had to literally put the book down and went, yeah, it's heavy, and so well written and so good. This is basically, you know, a sort of domestic thriller mystery kind of thing that actually, 1, deeply affected me, 2, just sort of like hit a part in me that went, ugh. And then, yeah, it's the same sort of, it was the same sort of like realm as a Karen Slaughter book in the way that it hits you with the sheer amount of gore. This hit me with like just the reality of the situation. I hope that makes sense. Maybe. Yeah, so this is a definite 5-star book. You pretty much can't describe this though because it will spoil it, and I don't want you to be spoiled for it. But if you have gone this long without getting spoiled for it, do read it, because I went into it blind and it was very, very good, and I didn't see anything coming. And it was hard and it was rough to read. So yeah, if you're into that, pick it up. Lastly, my last 5-star book of the month. Oh, so happy I read this. That is my best friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. This book was so silly and fun and like quirky, and the writing is just 100% what I wanted. Grady Hendrix is just being up there in one of my favorite like funny comical horror writers. That's a genre that I've come to realize that I like. I like my horror with a little bit of humor. It just makes it more enjoyable. This is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's set in the 80s, and these 4 girls go up to like a cottage kind of thing, and they all drop a bunch of acid, and one of their friends gets possessed. And it follows her being possessed and expelling the demon out of her. You wouldn't think by a funny horror book called My Best Friend's Exorcism that I would cry, but I cried. So yeah, I laughed, I cried, I was spooked out, you know, like all those things. Yeah, this is fucking fantastic, and I do highly recommend if you think you have sort of the same level of humor that I do and you also want like a fun possession story. Fucking read this, man, because this was really good. That is all of the things that I read in the month of October. Read some good stuff, read some not so good stuff. That's kind of how it works though. You never know what you're gonna get into, right? Leave me comments down below if you've read any of these, if you agree with any of my ratings. If you don't, that'd be fun. Have a conversation down below. And yeah, I do hope everyone is doing good. And until my next video, I'll talk to all of you soon. Bye!